Hey, welcome to you all. It's Todd again here with another Vectric YouTube live event. I'm glad you could make it. I know with those of you in North America with this daylight savings time thing where you jump into daylight savings time a couple weeks before we do, I think, over here in the UK, it's a bit of a mind-boggling thing to figure out the time difference, but I certainly am glad that you made it without a doubt. Yeah, so as you can see, we are still working from home over here in the UK. I'm still at my conservatory, and with all the normal sort of things that happen at home. Fortunately for you guys, my family left for a little bit to go get some supper, so I'm here alone for now, so it should be pretty quiet. Like I said before, every so often there is a train. Really, there is a train that goes by out back. It does make a little bit of noise, so I apologize for that if it happens. Just a little bit of update of what's going on here in the UK. Our vaccination program is going really, really well. A lot of us have gotten vaccinated already, and if not, it'll soon be happening for most of the population, which is perfect. We're excited for that to happen, and we're really all anticipating April the 12th. April the 12th is when our first glimpse of lockdown being opened up again in the UK. So on the 12th, non-essential stores can open up, like clothing stores and whatnot. You'll be able to get your hair cut. Not that I need that, but you got to get your hair cut. Things like that. We'll also be able to go visit zoos and any outdoor kind of theme parks. So Legoland, look out, I might be there. Indoor leisure stuff like pools and gymnasiums will be opening up again, which will be great to get out and get fit on those rainy days. And also some of our self-contained holiday accommodations will be opening up again. So we'll be able to do a little bit of in the country traveling and seeing some stuff, which we're all pretty excited about. But I have to say, I'm mostly excited about that we're going to be able to go out to a pub and sit in the beer garden and have a beer and have a chat with 6 of our friends. So I'm really kind of excited about that. That's going to be, be nice to do outside, which is kind of good. So that's all coming on the 12th for us. Let's just hope we can stick to that and get that done. I think that's pretty much it for right now for an update from here. As always, if you've been here before, you know that we have Becky in the chat room, and also our special guest Timsway is there as well. If you have any questions for him about what he does on his YouTube channel and what he does for his upcycling and so on, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer any questions you have, and more specifically about this actual project that we're about to share with you. I think that's probably it. So if you have any questions, pitch them out there. If we don't get to them, then please put them in the comments below, and we'll get to those as soon as we can afterwards. And we try to get to all of them if possible, okay? So that's pretty much it. So let's just get started. So as I said earlier, we are lucky to have Timsway with us today. If you've been following Vectric for a while now, you'll know Timsway because he had some free projects that we give away on a semi-usual basis through your V&Co account. I had the pleasure of meeting him a few years ago at one of our user group meetings. Very inspirational guy. Some of the projects that he's created for us would be this musical egg thing. I remember sitting with my young kids when they were younger in a circle at a music class, and we'd have those little plastic shakers. Well, you can make one now on your CNC out of upcycled wood that you can use and entertain your kids with, or even yourself if you're musically inclined. Also, you can download, this is another really great one, is a free plan to make a guitar, upcycled guitar, which is kind of exciting. We have a video for it, obviously, and information on how you can make that yourself. Now, some background about Tim. Tim is an avid upcycler. He likes to make a difference in the world by making sure he leaves a pretty small footprint behind, and that's pretty inspirational. He has a site called New Perspectives Music, where he creates a lot of different musical instruments with upcycled materials like hollow core doors or pallet wood, or using old bits of old instruments that aren't useful anymore, and he'll turn them into something new. One of the things I find really neat about it is that he actually, the music that he puts with all of his videos on YouTube, he actually plays on one of his instruments, I believe, which is, you can tell the quality of what he builds there. Now also, Tim likes to dabble in the tool making world, so he has quite a few years ago, I think Tim about 2 years ago now, maybe longer than that, I've been here in the UK for 3, so maybe 4 years ago, he created the Square, which is a nice little tool for using in your workshop to help you draw straight lines, make other circles and other specific dimensions that you might need, finding the centers of pieces of wood and so on. If you're interested in that, he also has some other tools, a really cool push stick and so on. He has those over at squaretools.com. It's a nice little thing to look at and see. And then one of his most recent things, which I think is crazy, I didn't know this was a thing, but guinea pig tanks. So he makes tanks for his guinea pigs and thought that other guinea pig owners out there might think that their guinea pigs would enjoy this. So he started to make, produce, and sell these cardboard tanks for guinea pigs. And yeah, if you want a good little chuckle, go have a look at how much his guinea pigs really enjoy these little cardboard tanks. And now he takes all of this and he creates videos and he posts them on YouTube, on his YouTube channel, youtube.timsway. So, or excuse me, youtube.com/timsway. So if you're interested in that, please head over there. Not right now, I don't want you to leave right now, but after this, head over there and become a subscriber to his YouTube channel. He's always up to something interesting and fun to share. So what we're going to do right now is we're going to cut off to a video that Tim sent us about his project and him making it. And we get to see his journey from nothing to a really incredible something in the end. And then him talking about a special part of this project that we think is going to be multi-purposed. And I'll get back to that in a little bit. So let's go ahead and hit his video for a few minutes.
Hey, welcome to this month's In the Labs of Tim Sway. I am your host, Tim Sway, and if you've been following along, I've been calling some pallet wood and some old hollow core doors to make this month's project. Guess what? It's a musical instrument. No big surprise. But what's cool about this one is that this one particular file that's included with this project, I think transcends the project that we're doing here, and something that you could potentially use for many, many, many other projects in the future. What I want to make is a small cajon for my friend Donnie, and when I was talking about this project with my friend Todd over at Vectric, he of course Googled cajon like you're about to do now, but don't worry, I'll tell you what it is in a second. And he saw one that had these kind of cool corner pieces, and we thought that that might be a fun thing to focus on for this project. The corner pieces are actually a three-sided carve, which sounds really complicated, but you're going to see in a minute that it's dead simple. I had a little bit of difficulty with getting my feeds and speeds right, so that's something you're going to have to deal with on your own. But first, what's a cajon? This is a cajon that I made a few years ago for myself, and it's not very good, but you know, it was my first attempt at trying it. Usually when they're made, they're a little bit smaller, but the idea is that there's this front surface that you can hit and get these sort of like low frequencies, and then there's also a part that has some metal straps across it that vibrate to give you like a snare sound. So what I want to make is something like that that's smaller and portable so you can carry it with you. It'll be a little bit smaller than these pieces of the door that I just cut, and you would wear it with like a guitar strap and just sort of play it here. And I have a thought that I made it with two chambers, a big one to get those bass tones, and then a little one to have the snare sounds. I could have two separate surfaces that the musician can hit. And I don't know if it's going to work or not, but I thought I'd try it.
But first I need to finish processing my materials. I made a couple of videos that go along with this one that sort of show the process that I use to make these pallets ready to use, and it goes into detail talking about this cool nail gun as well as some techniques I use to sort of square the wood up. So you might want to go check those out to figure out everything that's happening here. In a nutshell, I processed this pallet wood down to a 1/2 inch thickness for my sides, and then I had this nice really thick piece of dense ash that I squared up to make a 1 inch square to cut out my corner pieces that we're going to work on.
But I don't want to just make a boring old box. What I thought would be cool to do would be to take these pieces of wood that I just squared off, and they might even get a little bit smaller than this, and cut a slot here and a slot here so I can have my sides slide down like that and like that, and then have my fronts go on like that. And then of course I want to have maybe like a rounded over corner right here. So this material would be removed, and then I will cut a slot here and here. And I want to do this on the CNC. Like, I have a router table, and normally I would do stuff like this on the router table, but not everybody has one. But I think what I can do is I can set this up with a jig on the CNC, so I can just use an end mill and just cut that stripe right out and then cut these sections to the lengths that I want. So I do all 4 corners at once. Cut this stripe down here, cut this stripe down here, and then I need to figure out some way to round over this corner. If I set it up on the CNC machine to where I do all of this at once, and then I can cut them to length, and then I can put together my box. What gets me excited about this idea is that it would be useful beyond just this particular application. If you have these files on hand and a jig set up for your CNC, you could drop these things in and cut them all day, and then cut them to length and make all the boxes and drawers and cabinets and cubes and cubbies, whatever you need, out of this simple file. Let's figure out how to cut it.
To download all these files I created, log into your V&Co account at vectric.com. First, I wanted to draw this sort of cross-section of the piece I want to make, and I figured the easiest way to do that was, of course, in my Vectric software. I just made a 1-inch square, and then I made 1/4-inch by 1/4-inch cutaways for where those slots would be, and then rounded over the corner, just, using some basic editing tools. With that shape as a reference, now I can create the file that I'm actually going to use to cut. The first thing I did is created this rectangle that I will cut into a piece that will be mounted to the wasteboard as like a jig, and I, of course, pop the corners out a little bit so I'd have some place to sort of pry the wood out to get it out. Initially I cut it at 2/10 of an inch, but I changed it to the full 1/2 inch, which is the material of the MDF that I used, a 1/2 inch thick MDF that I just screwed to my wasteboard. Here's that first model I made to help me visualize how to cut this. I drew that rectangle as a 1/4-inch end mill, and now I'm kind of just looking at how I would cut it. So the idea would be to cut one side of the rectangle in the jig like that, and then flip it, and you can see that if I do a 90-degree rotation, I need to make a second line. I can't just use that same line. It won't space out properly. So now I'm just drawing lines, and I'm using this circle to represent my end mill to make sure I get my spacing correct. And just drawing these lines straight across that shape that I made for the jig. Using those circles to space it, I know that those are the 2 proper spots to cut my slots, one for one side of the stick and then one for another. I created some toolpaths and took a look at it, and everything looked good. Now back to my visualization, I started flipping the model around again to figure out the best way to do that radius. So you can see there's my 2 cuts lined up with the router bit. I, of course, had to move the router bit for the other line, and now I want to look at the roundover side. And I ended up doing it like this on the left just because it was easier for me to visualize for some reason, picturing it as the outside of the box. So what that means is I have to flip my stick twice to cut this profile. I also had the foresight to realize that if I ever take this off my wasteboard and want to use it again, I want to be able to line it up again real easy. So I put these 3 circles around the outside of my jig that I will drill through the jig and into my wasteboard and then mark those holes, so the next time I want to use this I could just line it up with those holes and my 0 will be all set. You can say I also put a 4th circle in the center, which I ended up taking out because I just don't need it by using this system. Now onto my round over corner. The best way to do this was to use a molding toolpath, and this is my first time using one, and it's much simpler than doing a 3D model, and really fast and easy to do. So you can see what I just did is I took a part of a circle to represent my round over or radius. I just made a 1-inch circle and used 1/4 of that, and then I drew a line across the board and applied that radius to it using the molding tool path, but I did it backwards first. I have the line starting on the outside edge and the curling into the middle of the piece. And so what I had to do was go in and right click on that and reverse the direction. And now when I recalculate my tool path, you'll see the radius curves out the proper direction, but I still have the line lined up at the outside edge of the rectangle that I'm going to cut. So all I need to do is move my guideline to the center of my 1-inch rectangle instead of the far left, and now that shape will start in the middle and then round over that whole quarter of the square. Like I mentioned, this was my first time using a molding toolpath, and it was super easy to figure out and set up the way I wanted. Just a couple minutes of experimenting and I had it. I will definitely be using this more in the future. But now let's get to cutting. I had oversized the ash that I had already cut, so I brought it down to size, and I also brought it to length of about 16 inches. I only need 12 inches of material for 4 3-inch corners, but I gave myself plenty of extra room for the saw blade width and mistakes. I just used a small piece of 1/2" MDF, screwed it right to my wasteboard, and centered my jig to it. And then I used a little bit of just red spray paint. I just sprayed right through those holes that I drilled deeper than my scrap jig, all the way into my wasteboard. And the red paint will make it easier for me to line those up in the future. They'll be red inside those holes now.
All right, I'm going to stop the timeline right here to jump around a little bit on making these corner pieces, because I wasn't happy with the first ones that I cut, but I went and I kept making the project. And once I got it glued up, I then had a minute to kind of go back and investigate. So it'll all make sense. I went ahead and decided to just keep using these pieces of wood, but I can't stop thinking about this deflection that I saw in the wood here, and how on the one pass down, it was off about 2/100ths of an inch, and I want to make sure that this is safe for you and going to work properly for you. So I went, first I was like, well, maybe I was just trying to bite too much wood off. So I screwed this piece of scrap wood down and I ran the same toolpath, and you can see it came out perfectly. I cut another piece of wood to use, and I went over and I used a handsaw and just cut little pluses into this wood that I could just bang this washer into. So I just cut a new piece of wood, and using the same jig, I'm going to pop it in here. But this time, instead of just trusting that pressure fit, I'm going to screw down these washers on the ends. So the washer's tapped into that little slot that I made, and now it will be fixed to the board.
One suspicion I had for that slight error was maybe the wood shifted, and so now this eliminated that possibility, and I ran the same toolpath to see what it looked like.
The deflection is still there a little bit, so my guess is that this wood is a little too dense to do this step. So I'm going to do the same toolpath again, and I'm going to do it in 4 passes instead of 2 and see if we get it cleaner. And you see how I cut this X so I can flip this around like that and then flip the washer.
I actually went and tried it doing 3 passes, and you can see how easy it is to just click the Edit Passes button, and you can micromanage every pass and every cut that's made on every toolpath there. You'll also see that I have the software program to do all climb cuts, but it's actually going climb and then conventional cutting on the way back and then climb again, which will change the stresses on the bit and make it more likely to deflect, especially in this really dense wood.
By doing 3 passes at the same speed, it looks better, but it's still not perfect. I bet you what I need to do is slow it down, because this wood is so dense. And the other thing is I'm using a pretty long end mill, like longer than it needs to be. So the game is all feeds and speeds. They talk about it in CNC, and a lot of times like, yeah, whatever, just cut the thing. But sometimes you really see where that comes into play with your files. So the file that will be available for you to download will be based on my machine settings and how I can work, but you're going to probably want to run some test cuts on your own machine and start sort of erring on the side of caution, because every machine is going to be different with what it can handle and how fast it can cut and what kind of wood you're using and everything. You can see the difference here. This is the same exact tool path in pine versus this very dense ash, and you can see the difference in the cleanliness of it. Feeds and speeds and materials. It is a cocktail to get just the right mix.
Like I said, all of those tests and experiments were done after I had already glued my thing up. So now we're back to the first one that I cut, and I am adding that round over radius to it. And it was, like I said, super simple and worked perfectly. I was super excited to open this aspect of CNCing up to me. And there is my 3-sided carve in its glory. It looks just like the original drawing, and I'm really happy with the way that turned out. Now to cut them to length, I just used my table saw sled, and I used the pieces of wood that I will use as my actual sides to measure the width. I cut those ugly ends off, and then just using that stop, cut 4 pieces. Next, I need to add an end rabbet to all of the boards that I will use for my sides, and I kept it all simple by just using 1 inch and 1/2 inch as my material thicknesses, and then my rabbets are now 1/4 inch, just half the thickness of that. So with a few measurements and a few test cuts of just dialing in the precise height for my table saw blade, I was able to go ahead and do it. Again, this could be done on a router table, and actually included in your download is a file that has all of these pieces mocked up in Vectric. So you could cut these out on your CNC if you feel better doing it that way. But this is a cool trick to know. If you have not made yourself a table saw sled, it really opens up the tool and makes it a very safe and effective tool for doing all sorts of amazing things like this relatively easily. I mean, I love my CNC, and my router table for that matter, but this is the fastest, easiest way to do something like this, no doubt. I also had to put some slots in the middle, which I just made the full 1/2 inch width of the boards for that second chamber that we're going to put in the drum. This is all going to make more sense as you see it come together. I did a quick little dry fit to make sure everything looked like it was going to work, and now it is time to cut out my top and back out of my favorite reclaimed material, hollow core doors.
So there's our basic instrument.
I still wasn't sure the best way to hold this instrument, which way was up or down or whatever, and I just designed it basically what turns out to be upside down. But it doesn't matter because it just gets spun around. So here you see what I did is I drew a line where I wanted to divide those two chambers. I put a bunch of circles along it, and then just using the snipping tool, I cut away every other circle piece and made that little wavy shape. And now what that wavy shape does is it gives me the opportunity to screw both of these pieces of wood onto the same half-inch strip without having to worry about butt joining them and having very little space to put the screws. I also put little 1/10 of an inch circles all around the perimeter of the piece, and in those little half circles, you can see I just created a little guide there to make sure all those were lined up to screw the top on, because I want the tops to be removable, and I'm not quite sure how many screws I want, but I want them to look good and be lined up, so I just thought this would be a simple way to mark those. Now to create some tool paths, what I did is I used a 60-degree V-bit to mark out all of those holes and also cut that wavy line. And so what this does is it gives me like a recessed screw hole, and then after running some tests of cutting out the parts, I realized if I use that same V-bit to cut that wavy line, I could make that look more seamless as well. So I could cut all the way through and it would just sort of blend in, which is what I ended up doing. The other thing I did in this file is I imported those corner pieces and I created all the other parts of the box just from the side view to help with your planning and design of the instrument, just to help you see it all. And then, like I said, there is a separate file for the sides where you could cut those out. This is a real simple CNC operation. I started by finding the center of my piece of wood and used that 60-degree V-bit to just go around and make all my sort of countersunk screw holes around the edge, as well as cut that wavy line, which I felt worked really well. I then used an 1/8 inch end mill to cut out the entire shape with some tabs, and I cut another piece out exactly the same without the wavy lines and screw holes for the back, as that will be glued on. The tabs are real small and thin, and they just popped right out with the chisel.
Go like this. Now, there's one more thing I need to do is I want to cut a port on the side, an air port. I'm not going to worry about it on the snare half. I want to do it up here like a circle that I can then put a little plate over to kind of open and close and change how much air can escape, which will change the tone and resonance.
I drilled a pilot hole so I could come at it from both sides with a Forstner bit and get nice clean edges, but like I mentioned before, I did draw all these shapes and pictures up for you in a Vectric file so you can cut them on your CNC if you want, or just use those as paper templates. I then also cut a circle about a 1/2 inch diameter bigger than this hole out of a piece of the hollow core door skin and used that as a little lid. You'll see that in a minute. But right now I am gluing it up, and this is where I was realizing that I had that drift problem that I wanted to address from earlier in the video, as I saw how these pieces were going together. For this project it's fine because the corners will not be visible, but if you were doing this for something where you made a box that had these visible corners, you'd want them to look better, and that's why I wanted to look into that drift. You'll see I glued the back on at the same time just to keep everything sort of square and true. I just used some weights to get those to stay on, and a couple clamps in the middle of the box to make sure the wood didn't bow out. Having a frame clamp like that really comes in handy.
It's already starting to sound like an instrument. You can see because of that deflection we talked about that it's not 100% perfect in there. This one's a little bit loosey-goosey, but this isn't a visible joint. So if you're going to make this as a visible joint, it's important to definitely check your feeds and speeds and do some test cuts first, otherwise it'll look a little raw like that. I say this all the time, but everything you ever do, everything is just practice for the next time, and then you die. I know that might sound glim, but it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be inspiring because, you know, everything we do, we can do better the next time. This is the first time. The joint is good enough. It's strong enough. It's just not perfect. And I'm not going to get hung up on perfection. I'm going to move on, because if I get hung up on perfecting this joint right now, I never get to make the next thing.
Of course, there's always sanding to do, and any variations or sort of unevenness in the sides were very easily remedied by just hitting it with a belt sander. And then I wanted to make sure that top surface was nice and flat, so I could screw my percussion heads to it. Notice when I sanded the edges, I put my sander at a slight angle to just sort of soften that edge up a little bit. I don't think you need to put a screw in every one of the holes that I created. You might want to even make fewer of them. As you can see, I sort of skipped some here and there. But, you know, experiment with what works for you and what makes sense. Now, the other thing I wanted to do was make sure I could hang a guitar strap on it. And that's what a guitar strap peg looks like. But as you can see, a 1/4-20 bolt or a big-headed screw works just as well. So that's all I use. And you could even just tie a string on that. I was trying to illustrate there. I ended up putting 4 screws on it, 1 in the center of each side, because I wasn't quite sure the best way to hang the box. But I think in hindsight, it would hang better if the screws are more near the top of it, and it might not move around as much. You'll see that we had a little bit of problem with it kind of moving too much while Donnie was playing it later in the video. And all I did to finish this was put a coat of linseed oil on it.
Typically what's inside a snare drum that makes it rattle is a thing called a snare, and this is half of one that I cut and used before. And so it's just these pieces of metal that are stretched across, and they kind of rattle when you hit the snare drum, and you can adjust the tension and whatnot. Obviously this would be the best way to do something like that, would be to simply mount something like this to it, but not everybody has that. So what I'm going to use are just a bunch of old guitar strings, and I imagine just about any kind of metal wire would probably work. What I did is I cut a couple scraps of this hollow core door, and I'm going to hot glue them down with these strings on there and experiment a little bit.
Apologies, because obviously I had my whole camera set up wrong for this, but you'll see the end result in a minute. What I did is created a snare looking item out of guitar strings.
It kind of looks like the thing that's inside a snare drum, right?
So I hot glued my homemade snare with just the guitar strings glued to those strips of wood, and then I glued that whole thing down to inside the lid and cut the wires to fit.
So I've got these strings going every which way from Sunday. I got some above the wooden bars, some below. Some are kind of tight, some are kind of loose. They're all just different thickness old strings. That's not bad. I'm also going to put these screws on just a little bit loose, so that gives the wood top a little bit of room to vibrate. And I'm not using all the holes that I created either. I'm only using a few of them right now. I think I got a little carried away with the amount of screws I planned on using. I haven't decided how to hold or play this yet. I ended up putting screws on all 4 sides just right in the middle, so you could actually turn this and play it. But that's the great thing about making a new instrument, is there are no rules. Maybe like this. Well, I don't know what to do with it, but I think my friend Donnie might have a pretty good idea, so I can't wait to give it to him. Let me give him a call and see if we can make that happen. That's perfect, man. Okay, I think we're good. This is my good friend Donnie. Donnie and I played together for what, 200 years?
Something like that. felt like 300.
Yeah. Donnie plays all sorts of percussion instruments, and one of the things that we did a lot of was playing these sort of acoustic setups where he played this cajon. So Donnie's going to try out, and I don't think you know this, but I made this for you, so I hope you like it. You're going to try out this cajon idea that I had.
All right, all right. Oh, looking cool. Check it out.
Guess what it's made out of?
Well, what kind of wood you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. Could I guess? Mahogany?
I'm sure you've seen those portable cajons.
I have seen a couple things, but only on the internet. Yeah, not in person.
You never played one?
I don't think I have any experience with them.
So I thought I'd make 2 chambers. So there's a bass snare, there's a piece of wood dividing them.
Okay.
And go ahead and
This
just
thing's beautiful, man.
see if you can figure out how to play it and see if it.
I mean, just looking at it right now, I kind of feel like it should be hung like that, right?
That was my first thought. But then I found when I was trying to play it, I was going to the side.
Okay. Okay, there's some cool sounds already happening. So we gotta figure out how to, what's the right way. Okay. Now, right now we're getting a lot of movement. So I wonder
Right.
how I can. I think for playing, I do kind of want it to be like
that.
on this side, so I can hit either sound with both hands.
Well,
Instead of having them divided. But other people, though, I can see them wanting to like be able to, like one bass drum hand, one snare
Right.
hand. They would probably like that.
But you're used to playing the cajon where you go down
Right,
and
right.
up.
But I see a lot of other cajon players that do that, where each hand has a job.
Yep.
Actually, that's a pretty good setup. That's
Yeah.
got a lot of potential on that stuff because you can hit both parts. I wonder if you need like a hip strap as well.
Right. Well, that was the way some of them were made. You know, this tool was actually a Vectric project. So.
Instead of the sides.
Yeah.
The sounds are very isolated, which is cool. Right?
But that was the goal. Yeah.
Yep, you get.
There's no port on the snare side at all. Do
Yep.
you think it needs one?
I don't know. I don't feel like it's having trouble with air getting out.
Yeah. And then for the bass side, I put that small one on the.
That did seem to help, yeah.
I was kind of thinking that maybe it should be on the back, like a bigger hole in the back, like a traditional cajon. But then I was afraid to drill a hole in it. I want you to play it first.
Well, when you think of like snare drums and stuff like that,
Yeah.
the hole is on the side of the shell.
Yeah.
The vent holes are always on the side.
True.
Yeah, no, it's probably better on the side because if you go in the back, you don't have any chance of getting any tone because this plate won't vibrate at all. All right, now I'm already starting to pretending I'm on a gig. I'm having fun.
You started playing with it, hit it now?
Yeah, now I'm getting it to open up more.
Yeah.
And it's just sitting this way. It's just kind of cradling in my, like in the way I'm sitting. So now all of a sudden I feel like I dig into it a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And because it's like if you don't hit it right, it doesn't ring right. That's the only thing.
Right. You're looking for the sweet spots.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then you get to the right sweet spot and hit it right. You get good volume out of that.
Yeah, the snare sounds great. I'm really happy with that.
The first time I learned about the cajons was in Cuba. And they explained to me that it started, that they were the boxes that candles used to be shipped in. I think we're thinking like 300 years ago, something like that, okay? And they would look for boxes that sounded good. Then they would look for one that was higher, one that was lower.
Oh, yeah.
And if you could get 2 or 3 of them, you have a good party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Here, okay, you want to start with brushes?
Sure.
I wanted to point out too that this double bass that I'm playing was also made out of hollow core doors. So
That's right.
the whole video on my YouTube channel about that. Hollow core doors, decking, and shipping pallet, just like that. We're almost there. I want to have the hollow core door band, and I'm working on someday having the drum kit.
Right. Okay, well, this is a start.
Okay, let me just stop it right there for now. if you wait until the very end of this video, you're going to see more of Donnie and Tim playing. It's pretty amazing to see the whole process of Donnie sort of learning how to use this brand new instrument. And as it happens a little bit later on, you'll see that he really gets into it and really is enjoying using this new instrument. So it's a lot of fun to watch. So definitely, after I'm done going on for a bit here, you should hang around for about 5 minutes or so and just listen to that. And of course, you can stay in the chat room and keep that chat going. That would be great as well. I think what's really neat about this whole project is that Tim uses his CNC as another tool in his workshop. And he was quite open about that, in that he could use a CNC to cut some of these parts, but sometimes he finds it a bit easier to use his traditional woodworking tools. And I think that that is great. Some people just have a CNC and they need to use that as their full sort of workshop, if you will. So him adding in the extra files, so that if you have just a CNC and that's pretty much your only tool you have and some other basic stuff, then you can go ahead and make this with your CNC. So on that note, I'm going to go through and take a quick look at all the files that he's created. Now, of course, he did take a look at 2 of those in his video, but I'm going to take a slightly closer look at the last one, and then we'll get on to some other good information, okay? So this is the first file. It's called Cajon 3-sided rails and jig. Now, as always with all of our files, make sure that you read and understand the notes here that are here. It's really important that you change all of the tooling, the feeds and speeds and everything based on your CNC and the materials and the tools you have on hand, okay? It's really important to be super safe with this. So I'll just click OK and get by that. So here we've got it, and Tim did a great job laying these out for you. Like he said in his video, on the top here he has the cross section of his actual connector piece that he's using. He has the 1/4 inch piece of material that he's going to put into that little into the dado here, which is in the end of this connector. And then he has his side, or his profile that he used for his molding toolpath. It was great to see him use the molding toolpath. It is a very powerful toolpath option that we have in our software, and from VCarve Desktop to Pro to Aspire. Oh, and I forgot to mention, where's my head? That we're going to look at all of these files in VCarve Desktop. Of course, they're openable in VCarve Desktop, Pro, and Aspire. There's nothing Aspire only here, so you can use all of these across the board. He has all of his different layers set up here, so you can take a look through those and see what he has. And then, of course, his toolpaths. Now, one of the great things about a manual 3-sided indexing or 4-sided indexing method is if you don't have an indexer on your machine or a rotary, then you can go ahead and still make multi-sided parts if you have a good jig or you have a good idea of how you're going to do this. And Tim set up a really nice jig here. I know years ago I didn't have a rotary attachment for a CNC at a company I worked for, and so we had to do everything manually indexed. I made things from lighthouses to little figurines to all kinds of things, just manually indexing it. So this is a great way of doing it, for sure, without a doubt. So he has his 5 tool paths here. He's got his jig. Of course, he cuts that in MDF. He has his wasteboard guide, so if you want to go ahead and stick this down to your wasteboard, or you want to relocate it in the future if you'd like to. He has his first dado cut, his second dado cut, and then he has his molding tool path set up here. So let's just go ahead and have a quick preview of these. Actually, let's look at it this way here. Makes it a bit easier. So we'll go ahead and preview his jig tool path, which is exactly like he showed you in the video. Or go ahead and, if you wanted to cut those little holes there, you can do that as well, so you can line the thing up. Now the idea is you're going to cut this first tool path, so we can preview that. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take your wood out and you are going to flip it, and then you're going to cut your next tool path. Okay? And then you're going to take it out again and you're going to flip it, and you're going to go ahead and cut your last tool path. Or I guess in this case he flipped it twice. And we're going to go ahead and cut that tool path, and you'll see that that is the molding tool path. So you get that nice rounded edge on your piece. And it's a really fast and efficient way of cutting, molding, and so on, or shapes like this. If you need them, even if it's not making a molding or a trim for a frame or something like that, you can certainly use it for all kinds of other applications. Okay, so that's that file. Let's go ahead and take a look at one of his other files. We'll have a look at the overview. So this is the overview of his whole job, the whole project, again, from the the front and the back of his project, the panel. So again, same rules apply. Make sure you read and understand this. And he did a great job. This is one of the things I really appreciate about this file. Tim did a fantastic job laying this out so you can actually see how all of these parts interact with each other and how they're going to work together. Got all of his layers all labeled appropriately, so we can go ahead and turn on and off the corners if we would like to. So that's that light, or the light green there. We can go ahead and hide the inside boards or the side boards that he's going to use, and we're left with the actual toolpath vectors that we need to create this. So let's go ahead and have a look at this. So, and I really like the idea too of Tim using the V-carve bit to cut the wavy line there so that they actually fit together nice and tight, and also making those countersink holes for his screws so he knew exactly where to place those screws when he wanted to actually screw on the face. Also, he's named, just an aside, he's named this last toolpath, only cut this one if you want to just have the back part. And at first I was a little unsure of how he stuck this thing on, but he didn't screw it on, so he actually glued it on the back, as you saw in this video. So you don't need to actually run the countersink holes unless you want to. I guess you could, just don't run the S through the middle. So let's preview those toolpaths right quickly. So again, we're going to preview the split down the middle with his V-carve bit that he used, which looks really cool. And then he's gone ahead and done his countersink holes. And he mentioned a couple times in this video that you may want to reduce the number here if you want to. You don't need to have all of these. It depends on how you feel about it. And then of course there is the outline of the back side. So you can just pop that out and off you go. And then you'll cut the back side and you get the two parts. Again, he's formatted this perfectly so it fits into VCarve Desktop. So if you have that, you can go ahead and use this file like I said earlier. So let's close this down. And let's look at the next file, which is going to be the sides and so on. Now, this is a great file because in his video he used his table saw sled to do the rabbits and also the dados, the rabbits at the top and the bottom, and the dado through the middle. But this file, you can do it all in your CNC. So if you don't have a table saw, or if you're like me when I used to live in Canada, my table saw was a little wonky and I wouldn't want to try something like this. So definitely, if you want to do it on your CNC, you can go ahead. So again, read and understand the notes here. And here we have our file. So let's have a peek at the toolpaths that he gave us for this. Oh, sorry. And we can start off with our dados here. Here we are. There are dados top and bottom and in the center. Okay. And then we're going to go ahead and look at the next one. And it's great too. He's only used a 1/4 inch end mill and his V-carve bit for this whole job. That's fantastic. There we have the actual hole for the air to get in and out. And then we have the last file, or the last toolpath here to go ahead and cut those out. And you've got the end bit here at the end that actually slides in to make that little shelf in there. So you have the two areas of your cajon in there perfectly. So that's great. So he gave us all that you need to go ahead and make this really interesting little instrument. But like he had said, one of the most interesting parts of this whole thing was this manual indexing of this connector. And it works really well, of course, for this instrument, but you can see probably already that it has lots of different uses. I've seen a lot of the time, I think my daughter has some in her room, I think she does have some of these square kind of shelves in her bedroom. You could actually make those using this this connector, and it would look really great. Maybe instead of having that sharp point on the inside, if you did a four-sided indexing, you could actually round it over as well. And make it look like a real nice showstopper piece on your wall. You can make this the actual connector piece as long as you want or as short as you want, and just cut it into the pieces that you need to make whatever shape you're trying to do. Another thing that I saw as I was floating around the internet thinking about this was this box here. So instead of cutting your channel all the way through or all the way across your actual connector, only do a short distance inside of that, and you can create a box like this where you have legs on the bottom, a proud top on it, and still your sides fit nicely into these joints in the side, or these holes in the side, and you can cut a box top that fits right on top, nice and tight in between those legs. I think that's really kind of cool, maybe even for a coffee table. That's quite big, but that might work, or a small box or something for trinkets. So, lots of options here. I really hope that people take this and take the idea of this connector and really build on it. So as I said, you get your files, you get 5 files with this, or 4 files with this, excuse me, and they're available right now in your V&Co account. So if you hop over there right now, not right now, after this video is done, sorry, don't jump yet. You can download this file for free, and you can go ahead and cut this on your own. You get all 3 files that I showed you, and also you'll get a PDF file with instructions on how to make this thing, or at least the materials that you need anyway. If you make this, we'd love to see it. So post it socially, make sure you tag us in it, or post it in our Vectric user forum, and we would love to see what you're doing with this plan, okay? It's great. Now, if I had a CNC here in my tiny house over in the UK, I would make one of these because my kids would love it. Tim, you did a fantastic job, and I really appreciate you doing all the work that you did putting into this. He had mentioned there was a couple sort of videos on how he prepared his material. Those were sent out as teasers on Instagram in our account. So if you'd like to go over to our Vectric on Instagram, you can go ahead and look through the past posts, and you can watch those short teasers on how he actually made the materials that he used in this. And if you want to have more of Tim Sway in your life, then you can head over to timsway.net, and you can sign up or subscribe to his YouTube channel. You can start to follow him on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and he's always posting all kinds of neat stuff there. So again, Tim, thank you very much for all the hard work that you did here. This is a great thing, and I could really see the joy on Donnie's face. And as a little thank you from us, I want to thank Donnie for taking the time to actually playing this and learning how to play it. So it was incredible to watch. Now, if you've been following us on Facebook, you would have seen that Rebecca and Ollie have been posting some really nice instrument-related content on there. And we have a lot of our user base actually that does make instruments or music-related stuff with their CNC. This post here was on Facebook, and we've had quite a bit of interaction with it. So if you're a Facebook user, I would really, and you make instruments or make musical themed products, maybe plaques and whatnot, head over and take a look at that post and maybe add a couple of your ideas to it if you don't mind. That would be great. If you're not a Facebook user, then of course you can head over to our Vectric user forum and feel free to post anything in there that you make with your CNC, especially after this, any kind of musical instrument or musical theme thing that you make. Go ahead and throw it in there. Also, if you have any questions about our software or CNC in general, then our Vectric user forum is a great place to go and pitch those questions out there, and there's always somebody there willing to help. And if you happen to have a unique talent with your CNC, then you also should join up there maybe and be able to be part of our community, which would be fantastic. We would really appreciate that. Now, I hope that you enjoyed that, and I hope that you'll be back here next month on April the 19th, where we are going to have a Q&A with Karen Haddon. If you don't know Karen, then maybe you know CNC Tips, Tricks, and Project Finishing's Facebook user group. She was the founder of this Facebook user group, and just recently it's hit 35,000 members. So if you're looking for another resource for CNC tips and tricks, that's a great spot to go with. And so I've had a great conversation with Karen, and that'll be, again, we'll show that to you on April the 19th. If you're interested in how she got started, why she got started, and where it's all going, then she's got some answers for you there. Also, we're going to share a great project with you for Mother's Day. So, Mother's Day in the US, the UK Mother's Day was just last Sunday. So any mums out there in the UK, happy Mother's Day, and any coming up here in the North America, of course, we have a great project that maybe your CNC shop person might actually make for you. You never know. Anyway, so that's next month. So please come on back and see what we have to offer then. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut back to about 5 minutes of Tim and Donnie just jamming with the cajon and bass and guitar later on that Tim does. It's really great, and Donnie really comes into his own with this cajon and does a really great job playing it. So anyway, I hope you hang around for that and watch it. So from us all, from me, and from everybody here at Vectric, I hope that you're still making fun stuff, and most importantly, you are keeping safe during these times, okay? And until next month, we'll see you then, okay? Bye-bye.
Is that the right key? I don't know, but more regular, more Scott, I guess. Here. There you go. Keep going, keep going. There's a lot of sound in there, man.
Yeah, I just realized that I could use
It's like a combination
different ways to create, to make some
Yeah.
multi-dimensional rhythms going on.
Yeah.
Put all that friction sound really just gives you something to work with.
Yeah.
Charlie Brown.
Oh, God. I don't play anymore like you. I don't remember the changes. Let's take it to my house and put it in front of a good microphone.
Okay.